Hey again everyone, Lex here again, and today I am bringing you my final build update for the Shield Warrior build that I've been running this entire league. If you've been following this one since the beginning, I salute you. This has been super fun to run, and I gotta say, I think this is the actual best version of this build that I have ever come up with. I think I've got it in a pretty good spot, as I've pretty much cleaned up all of the tier 4 endgame stuff at this point. Arbiter of Ash, King in the Mists, Twisted Domain and Xesht, Simulacrums, etc., of which I'll have footage at the end of this video. As always, though no expedition. I don't know why, I've just been super unlucky and really haven't found what I needed to progress that part of the Atlas, and I just kind of lost interest a bit and pursued the other stuff. So I mean, I'll probably return to it at some point, but I have no doubt that this build can conquer, the tier 4 variant of expedition and the boss. So anyways, yeah, I would say this build plays mostly similarly as before, so you likely got the gist of the gameplay style and the boss combos and stuff like that in the last video, but we're going to go over some stuff that I've optimized to survive the tier 4 endgame events and bosses, and there are some significant changes to like the itemization and passive skill tree, I'd say. I'll also mention some different alternatives, as I think there's a good bit of preference and flexibility in the passive skill tree, and even some of the skills used to some extent. But before we get into the skills, I'll let you know at this point that the build will be linked in the description as always, though I'll have two links. One will be the PoE 2 Ninja link that kind of updates dynamically, so you'll see what I am experimenting with as up to date as possible. But if you want the snapshot of the build that is presented in this video, check out the mobalytics link instead. But yeah, let's talk about those skills because they're mostly the same, but there's still a bit to go over. Alright, I always tell myself I'll be faster in these videos, but that all depends on how clearly I feel like I am explaining things, because there aren't too many major changes in this regard, so we're really just going to go over, some of the more interesting support gems I decided to include, and I'll just refer to you to my previous video for anything that feels skipped over, because I thoroughly explained it all there. First up is Raise Shield, still not using the Shield Bash, but this ability now plays an actual role in my gameplay with this support gem. Rally. So I went over this a bit in my most recent video responding to someone's question about endurance charges and the role they play in my build, but this has been a bit of a lifesaver honestly in certain situations, since if we read the tooltip, the supported skill will consume all endurance charges on use, and you will heal for 10% per endurance charge consumed. So guys, this is basically a free 30% of your maximum life on demand heal as we're clearing maps and running simulacrums or whatever, as we almost always have 3 endurance charges floating around, since Magma Barrier gives us 1 every time we successfully trigger it. So honestly, yeah, Rally is feeling great. I most often notice myself using these in rituals and simulacrums, as I mentioned, and sometimes just during crowded maps, or if I notice my health is getting spiked down, and even just to offset the health drain from Berserk or something if you're fighting like crazy and not losing rage. This also synergizes really well with Twofold, which, as you can see, we have a 20% chance to double the benefits of consuming endurance charges, so potentially a life-saving 60% of your maximum life heal on demand at times, just 1 out of every 5-ish rallies essentially. Really good, guys. Yeah, I mean, I recommend you guys trying this one out and seeing how you like it. Feels good to have a heal on your right click, and often I'll just, usually get a Magma Barrier proc off when I want to heal as well. It honestly feels really smooth, and it greatly helps with those like more active situations. And then on top of that, we have Perpetual Charge Saga as well, which gives you a 35% chance to not even consume the endurance charges, but act like you did. So essentially you can get that 30 or 60% heal off, and perhaps tap it again and get like another heal right after the fact. It's nice to have this like 35% chance to be able to, double heal at times. And then lastly, Mobility is here, which you could honestly probably put on Resonating Shield, but if I'm using this as a heal in like a emergency situation, so to speak, I'd probably want to be moving faster. Plus, as you'll see in a bit, we have another like utility support gem in Resonating Shield. And next is Fire Spell on hit, which has changed a little bit. It's still socketed with Solar Orb as well as Font of Blood, no longer Font of Mana, because we're just not using that anywhere since we're blood magic again, and we don't have any use for mana or anything that boosts mana regen or things like this. However, you'll see that we have Fire Exposure as well as Strip Away here, which just makes that Fire Exposure a little stronger, socketed into this ability rather than Flammability. If you recall from my last video, Flammability was the one that was inflicting our fire exposure. That was our source of fire exposure, but since we don't have mana anymore, we can't really use that one to inflict fire exposure anymore. So that's why this is switched here. And just to make that a little more consistent, we have Impetus socketed here, just so we're gaining more energy per hit, and these solar orbs appear a little bit more often. It does feel pretty consistent, and my main worry was having this appear during boss fights consistently, and it does. So honestly, it feels pretty good doing this. I mean, Solar Orb has an assured chance to ignite if something is near it, so inflicting fire exposure is pretty much assured when you're using it this way. Temper weapon is also mostly the same as the last video, so check that one out. Basically, I'm using this one as an assist to clear groups and also to get ignite up on more targets, though this gem is new from last time, Defy, and I find it useful because temper weapon actually has a pretty wide damage range. Yeah, actually, if we take a quick look at the listed hit damage, you can see on the low end it's at 7.6k, and on the high end it's at 15.8k, which is basically double the low end. So basically the lucky effect will roll the damage twice on any hit and will take the better result. So I figure we might get more value out of it in this particular ability because the range is so wide. You know, again, higher end is like double the damage of the lower end, and this only occurs while we're surrounded, obviously. So this is when you have 5 or more enemies within 3 meters of you, but yeah, it just felt like this gem fit here and would be the most, useful here. But yeah, basically the rest of the gems have not changed since last time. Again, just kind of geared towards helping us clear things and helping us deal more damage with this ability. They'll be linked below and they're in the last video, so there you go. Infernal Cry is also basically the same. Just use this before you shield charge in boss fights or when fighting something else that's tough, or even in groups sometimes. It's a huge damage boost. Just make sure you're hitting a bunch of targets or the boss with the shout before you charge. Just one change in support gem here. I have Tireless socketed just as, a chance to not consume empowerment charges when you use a skill to be empowered by this. Again, this is mostly useful against bosses since we're going to be consuming multiple endurance charges that we generate with Magma Barrier to empower more hits in like other contexts like maps and rituals, etc. And here's a big new addition, Ancestral Warrior Totem. So this sort of fulfills the purpose of Shield Wall before boss fights, since this is where Font of Rage now lives, and you can just throw one of these up so much easier than Shield Wall. It appears where your cursor is, and the animation is really fast with Ancestral Urgency. It all around just feels better to use, honestly. Like, aside from using this before boss fights, you can use it during as well, since again the animation is just crazy fast with that support gem, and it also worked really well for me during maps and other events because you could just pop one of these up in the middle of a fight when compared to Shield Wall, which is just so slow, even with martial tempo. And it actually does some decent damage with how we have it socketed. I tried out a few different skills, but what felt most useful was either Rolling Slam or Leap Slam, and I ended up going with Rolling because Leap Slam, though very useful, consumes broken armor for that extra stun buildup, and obviously we want to consume the broken armor debuff with our Exploit Weakness support gem, which is currently on shield charge, so I just had to go with Rolling Slam. I basically use this as a rage battery, but again, as a nice bonus, it does some actual damage and can assist with clearing. I'll often spawn it in a direction I know I'm about to start fighting in, just so it's there and getting me rage right when I start fighting, and also perhaps to soften up or clear some groups while doing so. As an alternative, you could also socket this totem with Molten Blast as a way to keep fire exposure up on enemies and bosses more consistently, since Molten Blast has a 30% chance to inflict fire exposure on hit when you upgrade its quality to maximum. And I think socketing this with Scattershot might up those chances since you are shooting more projectiles. I could be wrong on this one because honestly I just put Scattershot in there for more damage overall, though I think I eventually switched back because the fire exposure inflicted by Molten Blast would just get overridden a lot of the time by the fire exposure inflicted by Solar Orb, since that also has Strip Away socketed alongside it. And then we have Elemental Focus here just for some extra damage. This was sitting in Magma Barrier originally, but that ability is hitting decently hard with how I currently have it socketed, so I figured I'd boost this one up a bit, and I don't really care about the ignite damage on this, so I don't care about the cannot inflict elemental ailments part. We already went over Font of Rage, but lastly we have Inspiration, because overall the health cost for these skills being blood magic is pretty reasonable, but this is the one skill that felt like it could potentially get me killed. It's not insane, but it is a pretty steep cost, so I wanted to mitigate that life lost with this gem. Alright, next ability, Shield Charge. Still our main boss killer. Not much has changed except I have swapped out Fire Infusion for Searing Flame, since we already are leaning into Ignite and damaging ailments magnitude. More on that later, but this basically makes the skill sacrifice some hit damage for some crazy strong Ignite damage. Overall feels really good, and again, this isn't really aiming to be a one-shot build, but this gem helps you melt bosses like really quickly. It feels efficient as you're running around, you know, and playing defensively, and their health is just burning away. Honestly, I really just dig that playstyle. I think if you really juiced up the hit damage through like a, you know, Prism of Belief diamond and a +3 melee skill necklace, etc., you might be able to pull off a one-shot on tier 4 bosses, but I don't know, their health pools are pretty insane at this point, and it felt more effective to me if I just leaned into the damage over time instead. And it's also a lot cheaper. Magma Barrier is down here, and this is now where Fire Infusion sits for a big increase in damage on this one. I think currently it was something like 20k listed, but the rest of the gems are mostly the same, though I do have Immolate here now, which lets us gain 30% damage as extra fire damage against ignited targets, and targets are ignited all the time, though I'll sometimes aim Magma Barrier at a Solar Orb just to make sure that I'm hitting an ignited target, so just so we get more of that, you know, damage into the Trample Toe screen clear effect. Also, I think I had Reach socketed into this instead of Magnified Effect here, but Reach is now in Resonating Shield, just because I felt like I wanted that little 5% more area of effect to break armor. I'm usually right up in a mob's face anyway for Magma Barrier, and Trample Toe again kind of takes care of the majority of the AoE in that regard. Speaking of Resonating Shield, here it is. As we mentioned, Reach is socketed here, and this alongside Unbreakable are the only two gems that have changed. Unbreakable just feels right since I'm using this ability as the primary one to proc Magma Barrier. Obviously, I'll throw in a Raised Shield when I want to rally heal, but for the most part, we use this ability for 90% of our Magma Barriers, and Unbreakable just, you know, helps prevent us from getting light stunned and increases our heavy stun threshold while using it. Yeah, stun threshold becomes one of our greatest enemies in the late game. So this one's a pretty relevant gem to have here and will help us out a lot. We don't want to get stunned. Flammability is down here, and honestly just these 4 sockets and keeping one empty just to keep spell casting costs down. But yeah, these support gems are interesting. So we have Heightened Curse, which is pretty straightforward. The curse will have a greater magnitude, a greater effect, so this just kind of fits in naturally. However, this next one is different from the previous video. It's Hexbloom, and this curse will essentially spread to other enemies within 3 meters when a cursed enemy dies. So this can be really helpful if you're up against a mob of monsters that have high fire resist, or, you know, like on a map that has rolled high elemental resists for monsters, or even in Simulacrum as their resists kind of build up over time. It's good to just throw a curse out there every now and then, because it will persist as you fight. You know, you'll kill a group of monsters, you know, they'll die, then the curse just spreads to more monsters. You kill them, it'll spread to more monsters, etc. It doesn't last forever, but it's still really useful. And next we have Focused Curse, which is just a very straightforward, hey, here's a faster animation time on your curse. There you go. And lastly, we have Persistence. This actually was in Ancestral Warrior Totem before, but I just felt like the cost was just killing me too much, so I wanted to use Inspiration there and instead. And this down here just kind of makes sense because the curse will now last longer on mobs, and therefore will be easier to spread to other mobs and, you know, those like group contexts, but also just useful on boss fights as well. Just the curse lasting longer is a good thing. We're running 2 auras right now. Oh, well, aside from Magma Barrier, we have Time of Need and Berserk. Nothing has changed here. Just check out the previous video if you want to hear my justification on these, but basically, it's just survivability and a lot of extra damage from Rage. And lastly, we have Shield Wall. Yeah, I mean, it's still here. I don't use it that often anymore, to be honest, but similar to the last video, it can kind of save you a bit in a hectic situation if you place it correctly, and it honestly also does a ton of AoE damage, so you can like wipe a group with it if you use it early enough. It's just a very slow animation time that kind of makes it impractical to use in the middle of a boss fight or in the middle of a simulacrum, you know? It just seems best used before such events as like a preparation or something. But hey, I mean, it is just extra damage, so why not? Also, as a quick bonus, the walls detonate instantly from either a War Cry or a slam skill, so there's some slight new synergy with the rolling slam Ancestral Warrior Totem that we're now using. kind of fun. All right, guys, I think that was a little faster than usual. Honestly, doesn't matter because we're going to spend a bit more time than usual talking about the passive skill tree and the gear, because I think those are the two things that have changed the most. And on top of that, allow for the most, like, you know, preference and customization on your part. Let's just get started with the passive skill tree. All right, so first things first, Smith of Kitava Ascendancy. Nothing has changed. That's all. If you want to hear the explanation again, check out that last video, but we're basically using the Ascendancy so that all we need to stack for our elemental resistance is fire resistance only. And I mean, honestly, we just kind of went over against the Anvil, which is Temper Weapon, and Heat of the Forge, which is Fire Spell on hits, so there we go, Ascendancy covered. All right, now the passive skill tree is looking honestly mostly the same, but you can see that we've changed a few things to try and free up passive skill points, and most importantly, we have some very useful jewels equipped. I'll also go over what I experimented with, because there was quite a bit, and I do think that there's some variation that you could pursue based on, like, you know, your preferences and your playstyle. I'll start with the more straightforward changes. So I've shifted some points around, and I'm obviously a higher level since I last updated you guys. Again, something that becomes an issue towards the end game is stun buildup, and this node here, Polished Iron, actually grants you a lot of stun threshold, even as a hybrid armor/energy shield build, since you are gaining stun threshold equal to 50% of your armor. And I believe that gains wording is important here, as it is more significant than, you know, most other stun threshold nodes that simply increase what stun threshold you already have. Like these three here. Overall though, I'll be honest, stun threshold doesn't really show up anywhere in the game, so it's kind of hard to gauge how much you need. I am basically going off of my testing, and my testing has shown that this node, Polished Iron, has solved most of my stun issues, alongside a stun charm, but you know, we'll go over that in a bit. Also, we shifted some points to hit these four here. Damage-wise, this just makes too much sense point for point, as we are dealing almost all of our damage at close range, so basically getting 70% increased damage in 3 passive skill tree points is pretty worth it. We have spec'd out of Immolation here. I know that that's some juicy ignite magnitude and strength. I like the node itself, but it's just these 3 nodes that are ignite chance leading up to it that make it feel inefficient. Like, I just do not care or need ignite chance nodes at all. But now we have these 4 over here, faster start of energy shield recharge nodes, and this notable passive giving us more energy shield recharge rate and allowing us to gain 20 energy shield when we block. Which we do often. This counts for both passive blocking when your shield isn't raised, but also blocks from your front, you know, when your shield is raised with resonating shield, shield charge, or, well, Wraith's Shield. One thing I was playing around with was Zealot's Oath, this key passive here. So this actually lets you recharge your energy shield with life regen, regardless of when you've been hit. I was using this for a bit, and it honestly felt pretty legit at times. You just need to stack a bit of life regen, and you'll be recharging your energy shield the whole time it is missing, at a decent rate too. I mean, obviously depending on how much life regen you've stacked, but this is different than how, you know, energy shield normally works. As I'm sure most of you are aware, you usually have to wait a bit without taking damage for the recharge to begin. Unfortunately, there's a bit of anti-synergy using this alongside blood magic, which means Zealot's Oath will not regen your energy shield until your health is back to 100%. So if you're using blood magic and your health is slightly lower than 100% and mobs damage your energy shield will not regen until your health is back at 100%, which can kind of bottleneck it in a weird way, since you are constantly using life to cast your stuff rapidly, and your regen is constantly trying to, you know, get your health back up to 100% before it can apply to the energy shield. Again, it just felt a little clunky, so I do think Zealot's Oath is overall strong, but I would recommend not using blood magic with it. Just go with mana, you know, sip some mana pots, use clarity, use inspiration and life tap on mana expensive skills, etc. For me personally though, I found that I like having the faster recharge time, because it actually isn't that impossible to get recharge to start as a warrior with this build. Even though we are pure melee, if your energy shield is drained and you want to get it back in the middle of a fight, just play more defensively. And I'll often, like, you know, stick to the outside of an area during like a ritual or simulacrum and run circles around while magma barriering and summoning totems, and maybe channeling a resonating shield a little longer so that I'm, you know, blocking more attacks from the front and, you know, getting that 20 energy shield from each block from covering ward. But also, as long as you don't take a hit that does damage, your energy shield recharge can start, so long as you are positioning well and blocking well. Your energy shield can come back like pretty reasonably. Oh, and yeah, I forgot to mention that obviously, yes, I am back to blood magic, as I mentioned before anyway. I just like using my life instead of mana, man. I don't know what else to tell you. It feels like I can get my boss combo set up off a lot more seamlessly, you know, without having to worry about drinking a mana flask or something in between abilities. But again, Zealot's Oath is totally viable. I would just recommend skipping blood magic, and you can just shift these 4 points up here, stack some regen because recharge doesn't matter anyway, and honestly, you can free up a bunch of passive points because you don't have to use those passive points for those energy shield recharge nodes, so you know, you can basically put them wherever you want. You could probably get started placing them here if you wanted. Again, a time lost ruby or something with a medium radius will hit all of this stuff, and it's all honestly pretty useful or relevant. I mean, there's the attack damage here, the maximum elemental stuff here, and even the rage when hit or gaining armor from rage here, so you know, that's definitely something to consider trying out. But since I'm talking about a jewel, let's talk about some of the ones I'm using, and we'll start with this one, a Megalomaniac. This one in particular allocates slow burn and ignore pain. For me, I think slow burn is really strong on a fire build that's leaning into ignite, since it gives you exactly the two stats you want to see, ignite duration and ignite magnitude, and it's located a pretty good distance away from where our build is clustered, so it feels like we're getting really good value out of this. And then I have ignore pain as like a bonus secondary roll that grants me 3 rage when hit by an enemy, but also 2% increased stun threshold per rage. Super useful again after grabbing this and polished iron, and I honestly can't remember the last time I've been mini stunned, honestly. And as you can see, I am clearly using a From Nothing diamond, which is located down here. Passives in the radius of unwavering stance can be allocated without being connected to your tree, so this was basically just to free up the 4 pathings passive skill points that led up to these 3. Again, since we're using the deepest tower, all of these increased damage on low life targets nodes are active all the time, so feels good freeing up those points. And honestly, if you end up going Zealot's Oath, I would actually consider these nodes over here, which all give you some pretty good life regen, you know, not bad. It's also on the cheaper side, this particular diamond, so that's also nice. The other 2 jewels are simply some normal rubies with some decent block chance rolls and fire damage. I think this one up here is actually a bit better as it has increased stun threshold, gain 3 rage when hit by an enemy, though strangely I don't think that stacks with ignore pain. I don't know if that's intentional, but I am definitely not gaining 6 rage when hit, so yeah, with both of these equipped. And obviously I got a lucky corruption here with the extra 10% fire resist. Some other notables I am considering is Blade Catcher. Criticals can still be scary, you know, especially in Simulacrums, and this helps reduce the crazy burst those can sometimes dish out. I think Vocal Empowerment is also cool, that you can empower, you know, 2 shield charges with 1 Infernal Cry, so that's pretty useful. I would probably either spec up to that one or hopefully nab it alongside Slow Burn on a different Megalomaniac diamond. And honestly, I did end up speccing these damage nodes down here all the way up to Spiral into Depression for more energy shield, armor, and move speed, and god, it felt so good. Unfortunately, the damage decrease was significant enough for me to spec back. Again, it's a pretty dream, but with the way this build is right now, these are just too many pathing nodes to reach it. You know, I feel like there are more useful things to put these into. Anyways, guys, that is the new and improved passive skill tree. I've been really digging this version of the build a lot. Feels a lot better than before, and hopefully you found those, you know, alternate recommendations useful. If you have more questions though, please just leave a comment, and again, just a reminder that there are build links in the description, so check those out. But alright, let's talk about the gear. Alright guys, so my gear is now considerably more expensive than last time, but honestly not even anything crazy. I really haven't spent anything above like 4 div for a piece, and I think that the vast majority of my gear might cost like, you know, 1 to 2 divs each, though I think I may have dropped a bit more on my weapon. But we're gonna, you know, go over each item individually, and I'll talk about each one. You know, a little different than usual, but I'll tell you what I like about what I got, how much it costed me, if I can remember, but also what I think the more ideal rolls could be on what I'm wearing. Alright, speaking of which, let's just start with the weapon. So I've said this before and I'll say it again. Elemental damage with attacks and plus melee weapon skill are the 2 most important rolls on this piece of equipment. However, last time I was using a one-hander and I am now using a two-hander, but to avoid stacking a ton of strength, I basically needed a lower level two-handed mace with a reduced attributes requirements roll. And I mean, I'm sure a version of this build exists where you do stack a ton of strength, and you know, maybe if you're a Titan or something, but for my purposes, I just wanted to spend my passive points and, you know, stat rolls elsewhere. Aside from that, I think I would have liked a bit more damage on this thing. A big physical damage roll would have been nice for a stronger temper weapon buff. Don't need accuracy rating thing are this crappy fire damage rolls. So yeah, there's something more like Fizz or Flat Fizz, and maybe some Strength, would have been good on this one. Next, let's talk about the shield. So this shield has about 200 more armor value than my previous, which is the most important stat, as 99% of our damage relies on a good armor value on the shield. And it has some other relevant rolls as well, like a high block chance roll, fire resistance, strength, and stun threshold, though they are all kind of low tier rolls for those stats. I mean, ultimately I would love an upgrade to this to be around 1.4k armor with a high block chance roll as well, though for me what's also important is like a higher additional physical damage reduction percentage roll as well, and I think those can only appear on shields, but it's a super useful roll. It really makes reaching armor cap a lot easier. But other than that, I think the rest of what's on my current shield is pretty good. I just wish they had, rolled higher tiers. The deepest tower is here. We already went over this in the last video and the last section, but we are wearing this for, the enemies to be counted as low life when they are in our presence. The implicit downside of this big bonus is that it reduces our presence AoE, which is bad for most classes, but not for us. This is a new chest piece. What really matters most on this is a huge armor and energy shield roll, because we have a passive skill in the passive skill tree that boosts it up even more. So find the most affordable chest piece with a juiced up armor and energy shield value that you can, alongside some useful stats. For me, I thought getting fire resistance is good. Intelligence, though it's kind of a crappy roll on this, it will help you a lot with meeting spell, support gem, and hybrid armor, intelligence requirements, and I have a good life regen roll on this for when I was playing around with Zealot's Oath, as I said earlier, but still not a bad stat, as it helps offset, the blood magic life cost and at times my maxed out rage health drain. The amulet, I believe, is the same as last time, with honestly decent rolls, but once again there are some kind of lower tier ones. It could be due for an upgrade. But yeah, I mean, +2 melee skill and spirit are pretty great for this build. Definitely need the spirit for aura allocation. Then from there, just fire resistance would be good, and some other defensive stuff, honestly, whatever you can get. These breach rings are honestly not too bad. It could be better, like the lightning resist on this one is useless, but again, a good combo of resistances and other stats. Really what I'm looking for is a good increased fire damage roll and a good fire resist roll, so that I can improve both of those further with Zoph's catalysts, and then honestly some decent stat rolls, either like strength or intelligence or dexterity, or even life regen if you're, again, Zealot's Oath, could be good. Yeah, this one on the right is missing fire resist. I do recommend getting fire resist on both if you can afford it. Just always synergizes well with Smith of Kitava and, again, Zoph's catalyst, but this one was just on a on a discount and I wanted to get it. Gloves are honestly not too bad. Pretty good armor and energy shield values on them, +2 melee skill, absolutely essential. Some intelligence, which is good on this build, and fire resist. Obviously, the maximum mana roll is useless at the moment since we are blood magic, so there may be some room for improvement here. Honestly, I'd probably want a dexterity roll or something instead of the mana one, since gloves can roll dexterity, or some kind of flat damage roll so that we're, hitting a little harder. The belt is currently a lot better than my previous, but still there is room for improvement. Like, I obviously don't need the thorns damage here. I needed this chaos resist though to get right to the cap of 75% on that one. And yeah, obviously I would have loved it if this was a utility belt for the more instant healing from the flask, and if this was 3 charm slots instead of 2, but overall I'm happy with this. Whatever I'd upgrade this to, I'd still want maximum life and strength on this, I think, or just kind of whatever stats that you need between that and intelligence or dexterity, but I do think that this being able to roll chaos resist is very useful, and I do think that you should invest in that for the belt. Trample Toe is obvious. The effect helps us clear screens very easily, though its stats are overall not very impressive when it comes to speed or tankiness, which is why we have these boots over here. And I swap these out for boss fights or for just running around the map, etc. I talk about this a bit more in my last video, so again, you can check that out if you want to hear more. But I mean, that's basically what I use these for, and I do think that you should invest in a decent pair of boots other than Trample Toe, because Trample Toe is pretty much useless outside of clearing groups, just slap these on when you're not trying to clear screens, basically. And yep, I mean, fire resistance, strength, high stun threshold is fine, 30% movement speed is great, though it could be higher, obviously, and I honestly could find a better energy shield armor value base to boost these up, and it could definitely be upgraded, so, something I might be looking for. Only have 2 charm slots, as I mentioned earlier. I think freezing charms are important because, I mean, if you get frozen in a bad situation, you're probably dead, and the same could be said with stuns, which is why we have this stone charm equipped here, so that we don't get mini stun locked to death. I found this to be super useful on this build, so I highly recommend it. It'll save you in like crowded rituals and simulacrums for sure. I think when I had a third charm slot, I was using the rarity charm, but I think slotting in one of those useful, unique charms could be beneficial, as would the unique variants of like the freezing and the stun charm, obviously. But you're looking at some pretty high prices there. One of the ideals for me would probably be Fall of the Axe, but you know, again, that's a pretty dream. Just start using up those chance orbs. I think that's going to cover it for this one, guys. Again, there's going to be footage after this of this build conquering all the tier 4 stuff if you want to see it in action. I hope you enjoyed this build. I think I will try another warrior build at some point, or God forbid another class. I think the only other class I'm interested in trying would be the Templar, but I think I may try out another endgame warrior build for fun, or maybe start a hardcore solo self-found character and see what it's like building one of those in this patch. But for now, that's going to be it. Enjoy the gameplay that's coming up, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
forth it already burns for you. Forward! Engulf! Power my destiny.